Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again, and this is a particularly great session. It's wonderful to see you all here, and what is so great is that we are going to be working together today with one of the most significant executives in the world, and somebody who has a deep background in how to make, break, and take music and artists and really spread it all over the world. Shridhar Subramaniam, just interestingly, is, aside from being the president of Asia and the Middle East for Sony Music globally, very important senior position. He was also recently nominated to be on the Billboard 2025 Global Power Playlist, or I don't know exactly what the title is. And then also you are the chairman of the Asia Regional Board for the IFPI. So you are touching all of these different things. And another key element is the IFPI recently rolled out its official Asia charts that charts weekly music charts for 6 countries across Asia.
Correct.
So that's the first time that has happened, right?
Correct, that's right. It's thanks to all the effort by the teams and the country associations. It's an amazing effort. Thank you.
So all in all, this sees just a further build-up of what happens in Asia, and as the speakers in the previous session spoke about, the growth of the concert business is driving a whole lot of things with the music business. So my name's Ralph Simon, and my goal is to try and develop music from this area in Asia all over the world, because I can see, and we can see, that this is the way that you really develop great business, great copyrights, and great music, and enhance the streaming numbers. So, Shridhar, what I thought we would do today is, to begin this, there are a couple of issues that I'd love you to speak about. First of all, having seen the immense impact globally of K-pop, let's have a look at what the next phase is going to be for all of us and the way the business works. So, look at the diversity of the Asian music markets, the talent diversity, the way that the Asia market is changing, and the song-driven markets that are really driving things. So just some thoughts from you on
Correct. Thanks, Ralph. Good morning, everybody. I think what I'm going to be saying, I don't know how much of it is going to be truly new to the people in this room, because I think they're all experts in their own domain. But I think what you heard on the previous panel, in continuation of that, we're seeing the similar issues pretty much across Asia, where there's a tremendous amount of obvious language diversity, cultural diversity. There are all these microcosms of influencers and creators and consumers. And with the increasing penetration of the internet and therefore all the services, each one of these things are surfacing. So it's a bit like, it's almost like the stratified Grand Canyon. As it goes deeper, you're suddenly revealing new cultures, new colors, and new material. And constantly, there is this need for each one of them to express themselves and move on from being, and just really talk to the people among their cohorts. And there is a whole bunch of new cohorts emerging, purely because of diversity. And on the back of that, we are seeing new cultural influences driven by 2 things. One is obvious localization, and the second is, I would imagine, there's a certain pride in putting forward their own local culture, not just to themselves, but to the world, and to share it with that. So that's driving a whole bunch of new genres that people would not have noticed and people have not seen.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the word glocalization. There's a very famous economist, a music economist. He's actually a streaming economist called Will Page, who spoke about it's not globalization, it's glocalization. And what does that mean? Exactly what you've said, where, like for example, in areas like the Philippines and Indonesia, you are seeing a local coming through that then expands internationally, as Ed Peter has explained as well. Tell us about what you're saying.
So, I'm going to use some loose examples. I think people have heard, I think Owen mentioned to I-pop, but, people have mentioned things like P-pop and T-pop, which are really origins of, say, Filipino pop or Thai pop. But there's an interesting genre that I think most of us would probably know. It's from eastern part of Indonesia, which is like a folk music tradition called dangdut, which was
always... Say that again, dangdut.
That's right.
And Tell us the style
So
of what that
it's a blend of, Indian, Arabic, folk, Malay traditions, typically played in small villages and small
and the
towns.
rhythm of it is what?
It's very strong, beat-oriented, lyrically, kind of very, got a lot of tradition in it.
So in the way that reggaeton would have emerged from...
Exactly. From the 5 years, the same thing happened even here. So
Right.
it's from the smaller villages, lower economic strata, and such like. And as the internet penetrated deeper and deeper into that, now we are suddenly seeing urban kids jump onto that, kind of refresh that with new beats and new sounds and new lyrical context and make it hip. And there is this colloquial phrase called hip dut now, which is...
Hip dut.
That's right, a hip-hop version of it or a hip version of it or whatever you want to call it. And suddenly, if you look at the Indonesian charts now, pretty much for most of this year, it's been one of these sounds that has been sitting on the charts at number 1 to number 10. And at Sony Music, this is a trend that's happening everywhere, right? So you see this happen. So we started a label to target this particular genre almost 5 years ago. And we've been doing a bunch of acquisitions, doing a bunch of signatures, signings, etc., in anticipation of this. So in fact, I think Orchard, our sister company, has done a great job of having a huge collective with them that is really producing truly path-breaking music in this genre. Now, this is expanding. You're seeing this influence now spill over into Malaysia, into northern Philippines, and effectively, on the back of that rhythm, we are suddenly seeing a very strong, I think, cultural moment that is beginning to happen.
And so this is starting to spread outside of just the region of Asia-Pac
Exactly.
into some of the international regions where the diaspora from those countries also carries some of the new sounds across.
I think it's more than the diaspora. I think this is one of those instances, similar to I think what you mentioned about reggaeton, where I think the reggaeton influence, which is just the rhythmic nature of it, it's built into Afrobeats.
Afrobeat, exactly.
Yeah, it's built into Punjabi music, where people took that rhythm and actually built on top of that. So we are seeing a similar thing with this, where they're taking this dangduk rhythm, and it's kind of insane. The rhythm is strong, but it's got a cheap keytone, keyboard to sound on top of it, and it's amazing, but it's exactly like reggaeton in that sense. And we're seeing that same rhythm now move into other markets.
So let's take, for example, a territory like the Philippines, obviously very important, where is there something called Pinoy pop?
That's right. I mean, it's exactly.
Explain that.
So, the Filipinos, first of all, are music obsessed. I think you got to give it to them as probably being one of the most, I think, highly, fan-driven, music-consuming, genre-agnostic. They consume music across all sorts of things. And they're very proud about their music and what they do with their tradition. And I think almost 7, 8 years ago, they started this whole first one to identify and brand themselves as Pinoy pop, obviously outside of K-pop, and then built on that. And we're now seeing essentially a huge rise of this. For example, we have a band by the name of SB19, who essentially...
SB19.
Correct. Who are essentially a 5-member boy band and following the K-pop model, but localized it to a very Filipino context, and who are obviously been doing really well, and with billions of streams. And now they've been working to expand their sound. So for example, they've actually kind of, recently landed in Japan, worked with our sister company in Japan to try and, build out a live tour, collaborate with local artists. So I think what they're really doing with all of this is either you take the rhythm and expand that, or you follow the K-pop model, which is you build out a fan economy and start rolling out fans across different markets. Now you can do that through live, you can do that through music, you can do that through social media, you can do that through fashion, you can do a whole bunch of things. So you're suddenly seeing these people adopting their local culture, being proud of it, and adopting different routes to try and spread their message and their culture.
So what is interesting is that you have such a broad reach and interest in the way that you develop talent. You yourself spot talent, you find talent, you develop it. You also understand the deeper layers of the business components of what you need to do in this multipolar world that we live in, and also to try and find ways in which bands, acts from the region can now be expanded internationally, because if you can start doing something and find a way that you can get that global audience that K-pop have done so successfully, you're now doing this in a number of other territories. So it's always been something I've respected so much about yourself as a professional, because you look at this from a creative standpoint, a business standpoint, an audience standpoint, a demographic standpoint. you're very broad in the way that you approach these things.
Right. I think people sometimes forget that that we are in the so-called creative music business, and I think we talk about when we talk about a whole bunch of things. We talk about is artists first or whatever, or we talk about platforms, we talk about consumers, we talk about creators. But I think ultimately we are in the business of culture. That's I think the broader framework in which we have to see ourselves. And if you're in the business of culture, to your point, not just me. Frankly, now it's the teams that do a whole bunch of these things in the market with local expertise and who understand what these things are. But you really fundamentally need to be culturally engaged and fundamentally curious as to what's going to happen and what are these new cohorts emerging and where these things are going. Some of it you try and anticipate, but some of it you just follow, frankly.
Exactly. So just looking at the whole notion of K-pop and the way that has really spread so substantially and really reinforced the appeal of Korean music. You spoke about Philippines and Thailand. Thailand is, just give us some sense of what you're seeing in that particular country.
Thailand is an interesting, really truly an interesting market. They've always been music obsessed again, and they've been, early on the live touring business. They've had, very strong labels. They've kind of fans, they're very strong fans. But the interesting thing that's starting to happen is the interest that China is now starting to have on Thai pop and Thai artists. And it's interesting that there are people who, artists who are being sent to Korea, in fact, sent to Thailand rather, but like the Koreans have done it, obviously, Lisa being the biggest example of that. Or you're seeing now, the Japanese artists, training, Thai folks. And you're seeing the Chinese people now reach in and kind of reach out to Thai producers to get the Thai sound. And again, Thailand has, in the northern parts of Thailand, they have a version of their own folk music from Cambodia along the border of Laos, which is, again, very folksy and very kind of trendy. And we're seeing some of that getting picked up now more and more in other markets.
So you've also been developing a Chinese artist called Jam Shao.
That's right.
Is that the way you pronounce it?
Yeah, I'm not the right person for that, but yes, possibly.
The point is, that's something that has made some impact. And if you look at the Philippines and just the pathway to how that has been growing, any other artists that you are seeing over the next 6 to 12 months that you're working on to build the bricks of a whole new approach to breaking them?
Okay, I think, Ralph, I don't think this is I don't think it's about one artist is going to change the world or put it on the map. I think, that's not going to happen. I mean, that will happen. They will be pioneers. They will actually be the tip of the spear to introduce new tastes and new flavors. But I think at the end of the day, it all starts with having success at home. You have to appeal to somebody home and then carry that crowd with you. And people forget that the rise of K-pop was fundamentally a home fans who propelled it outside of Korea. It was a concerted effort, but they did that. So I think
how do you stimulate that in the different markets? Because if you're seeing that, like for example, in Thailand, where you've recently signed an act called Jakone and also Jakhan.
That's right.
How do you seed it?
So, I mean, going back to the earlier point, depending on the artist. So, yes, first you have to let the artist drive huge amounts of this.
Which means you've got to recognize that from
exactly. So they have to be, self-motivated, obsessive, unique, all of those things, which is truly a great quality of an artist. But what you then have is different routes, right? One of which is you could say, hey, listen, I'm going to, develop the so-called idol route, which is I'm going to build a rabid fan base, and they're going to do my work for me. And they're going to expand. The second is you jump on a wave of a beat or a rhythm or a song, and then you drive that genre as much as you can. And I think hip-hop and local hip-hop in this region was on the back of that. A bunch of people jumped on an emerging global genre and built out a local version of that, and then tried to grow that out. The third version you try and do is try and just effectively be so unique and so different that the world just sits up and notices and says, oh my God, this is something really special that's happening. So different artists have different ways, and some people use other vehicles, going back to the point about songs. Some people use vehicles like TV shows, movie dramas, soundtracks, and those kinds of ways to do it. And some people use gaming, some people use influencers and short form videos. So, you now have your toolkit is pretty wide as to what you can do. Some people think they can do all, which is difficult. But I think the challenge is to find the map and the right roadway for each of these artists to build out and become a global thing. It's much, much harder now. It is not in the days of media, which was singular, which was radio, television, print, and those kinds of things. Now you have to really fire on all these web platforms. Given the volume of music that's getting released, and we haven't yet kind of been confronted with AI slop yet, but assuming that you have to stand out in this crowd, it's crazy. It's tough.
So if you look at the star-making machinery that can break and develop artists, and you look at the fact that, say, Spotify add 135,000 new songs Monday to Friday, incredible numbers, 750,000 a week. But if you also have a look back at what really started this, and a lot of people talk about Gangnam Style and how that was one of the keys that broke open this globalization doorway. Are you finding that there are certain acts which you look at from an A&R perspective where you try and see, well, who can be have the impact of a Gangnam Style?
I think when you sign an artist, you think everybody can do that. That's the unfortunate the problem with that, right? But that never happens.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is, I think Gangnam Style to me is a bit of a one-off, right? It's a bit like a Macarena. It's one of those things but you're right, it got noticed. I think the true, as I said earlier, I think BTS probably is the band that drove K-pop into this global domain, and that was their fans. And I think what they did and how they meticulously built them out is truly a lesson.
That is exactly correct. And in fact, if you look at the Demon Hunters, which is using anime really as a tool, which is another way that you can take, say, an anime form, building around great songs. It's still going to need a great song.
Correct. And you're right, as I said, this is one of the vehicles, right, of either populating music or popularizing culture. And I think, as mentioned in the earlier panel, soundtracks in India have been doing that forever. And in China, for example, it's similar. People think it's a very superstar-driven market or a Taiwan-based market. No, it's actually a lot of their stars come from television shows, and a big part of the market is really music from television dramas.
Right.
And so that's really the nature of that market. And so there are incredible pathways. I think it's an incredibly difficult job that I think people try to do. But at the end of the day, the best part is the music industry and the artist's intent are closely aligned in the sense that our success comes on the back of their recorded music success.
Right.
So, and their recorded music success drives a whole bunch of things for them, right? So we are kind of bonded at the waist, despite this love-hate relationship we have with them. But we are bonded at the waist that our success is intricately linked to their hit-making potential and their hit-making ability.
So do you think these charts that look at 6 countries in the Asia-Pacific market, having the charts as some kind of reference point for the consumers and the online development, is that something that is aiding your purpose?
It is. I think the point about the charts is a couple of things. I think the first of which is, you're right, it gives people something to gravitate towards, all right? And then say, okay, this is how you create cultural moments that, there are things that are dynamic and in motion. Right. Number 2, it gives you some clear metric to measure yourself against the others and see what does success look like, and in a level, transparent playing field. And I think the third thing it does is it, hopefully triggers consumer interest and, and wanting people and their fans to drive their positions on these charts. So yes, so it's an interesting initiative. We've seen the power of that. You've seen, like historically in the UK, something like Top of the Pops and what it used to do culturally, how relevant it used to be, or the MTV charts, and they were all huge issues that the whole world kind of gravitated towards. It happens with award functions. It's an annual chart, but frankly, we're trying to make that a weekly event.
So we've heard about Dung Dut. How many of you had heard about Dung Dut before today? That gentleman there, he's a Dung Dutta. We've heard about Pinoy Pop.
Yep.
So just give us some sense of what are your key priorities over the next 3 or 4 months of some talent from this part of the world that is starting to really tickle the tentacles of the future.
Okay, so I think as I said, I think this is truly an incredibly interesting part of the world. I think Asia is having its moment, not just from a revenue and a cultural, but also a cultural point of view. I mean, Asia, 5 years ago or 7 years ago, used to account for less than 5 or 7% of the market, or global market. Now we're up to close to 14 and 15%, and potentially we'll probably get up to 20.
And it will grow. No
It will grow, and I think the growth is sitting here. So not only will there be an economic impact globally of relevance, therefore, and therefore the increased interest in labels, money, everybody coming in, and all the activity that you see and the press that you see around investments and JVs and such like, you're going to see a lot of that, and that's going to drive. So there is going to be capital that drives and propels a bunch of things, or creates bubbles. But we believe that this capital can also help create culture in a strong way, and therefore culture, when capitalized, well capitalized, it's a bit like a tech company. Then you start experimenting, you start doing new and unique things. So to that extent, I see this happen across the world. I think each market will become very, very more local, more than even global first. I think it needs to become even more hyper-local. And from that will be, I think, the power that will emerge to be able to shape global culture because of the sheer volume and scale, and to be able to impact the algorithm technically. It's almost like, you look at the YouTube charts now, the world video charts. It's insane. It's entirely populated by Indian and Latin artists. It's crazy. And so you're going to see that happen on other platforms. And I think that is truly what is exciting. I think everybody in this room is really working towards that, and hopefully we do get to see that golden age of Asia.
Well, I must say, Shridhar, it's really fantastic to hear about this organic and broad way in which you develop the star-making machinery, where you can take something, have a great belief system, but also the tools by which you can grow digital. It's just such a pleasure to have you here at All That Matters. And
before you finish, Ralph, I think a lot of us in this room, just a few minutes, I think a lot of us in this room have done a bunch of things to put the industry on the map. We all do our piece, we all do our thing, but it takes, I want to give a big shout out to the team at Branded and to Jasper, who has, really stuck with the industry 20 years, given us all a platform to come, meet, connect, share ideas, moan about things, complain about things, look at crystal balls, be entirely wrong about things.
Right.
He's been through the highs and lows of that. So Jasper, thank you and the team for doing an amazing job and putting us all in this room.
Yeah. Well, so there you have it. Shridhar, thank you so much for coming today and telling us about this. We're going to be watching carefully to see what happens with anime, with all the different things that you're working on. But music is the thing, music is the drug that we all are addicted to, but addicted in the best possible way. Shridhar.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.